Et bonjour mes élèves, c'est Madame Brown et aujourd'hui on va parler des changements orthographiques dans les verbes qui terminent ER. So we're going to talk about spelling changes in ER verbs. So what are spelling changes in ER verbs? Now that you know how to conjugate regular ER verbs, it's time to learn about verbs that have the same endings as ER verbs, but also have changes in the spelling of their stems. The first group we're going to look at is a pretty simple group. These are verbs that end with CER. So verbs ending in CER changed the C to se dire before O to retain the soft C sound. So that's the S sound. Thus, the first person plural form, which is nous in the present tense, ends with se dire, O-N-S. Looking at the verb on the right, commencer, to begin. Notice that for the most part, this verb is conjugated like a regular ER verb. We have es, ons, ez, ent. Until you get to nous, and notice that the C has changed to se dire in order to keep the soft C sound. So if we didn't have that se dire there, it would be comment con. Because remember, just like in English, when a C is followed by an A, O, or U, as in cat, caught, and cut, it makes a K sound. If it's followed by an E or an I, it makes an S sound, as in scent or city. The same rule applies in French. So if they want the letter C to keep that soft S sound, even when it's followed by an A or U, they will add a se dire. So some other CER verbs that you might like to learn include annoncer, avancer, commencer, divorcer, effacer, lancer, menacer, prononcer, remplacer et renoncer à. Another group that's somewhat similar to the CER group are verbs that end with GER, so GER verbs. These verbs ending in GER insert a silent E between the G and the O to retain the soft G sound, J. Thus, the first person plural form, which is nous, of the present tense ends in GEONS. So looking at the verb manger, which means to eat, notice that for the most part, this verb is conjugated like a regular ER verb. We have es, ons, ez, and ent. But in the new form, notice that the G is now followed by an E in order to keep the soft G sound. If that E wasn't there, it would sound like nous mangeons, and that would break the pattern of the sound. Je mange, tu manges, il mange, nous mangeons, vous mangez, il mange. So we want to keep that je sound. Some other GER verbs that you might like to learn include aménager, arranger, bouger, changer, corriger, décourager, déménager, déranger, diriger, et encourager. And even more still, GER verbs include mélanger, nager, neiger, which is pretty rare that you would ever want to say, we are snowing today. But I put it in there anyway because technically it is a GER verb that would take an E in the new form if you ever had an occasion to say, we are snowing. Obliger, partager, plonger, ranger, songer à, and voyager. So now these group are called stem-changing verbs. So in the previous two groups, there was only a spelling change in the new form. The next group of verbs, however, changed their stem after dropping the ER in every form except nous and vous. The first group we're going to look at are verbs that end with YER. So in the present tense, verb ending with YER, change the Y to an I before silent E. That applies to all forms except nous and vous. Looking at the verb envoyer, which means to send, Notice that nous and vous are conjugated like regular ER verbs. You drop the ER, you add ONS or EZ. These other, however, the Y has changed to an I. Now notice the shape in green kind of looks like a boot, so we call these sometimes boot verbs. The other thing I'd like to point out is that they are all pronounced the same way. J'envoie, tu envoies, il envoie, elle envoie, on envoie, il envoie, elle envoie. I guess you could say the S on il and L plural. But anyway, for the most part, envoie is pronounced the same way. Some other YER verbs that you might like to learn: appuyer, déployer, employer, ennuyer, essuyer, nettoyer, renvoyer, tutoyer, and vouvoyer. Now, there is a big exception: verbs that end with AYER. Verbs ending in AYER may keep the letter Y. It is optional, except in the nous and vous forms. Only Y can be used before the ending for these two subject pronouns. So on the right, look in the verb payer, to pay. Again, notice that nous and vous always keep their Y, like regular ER verbs. They just add their ending. But the other seven could have an I, could have a Y. Their pronunciation is the same either way. Some other AYER verbs that you might like to learn: balayer, to sweep; effrayer, to frighten; essayer, to try. Now for some more complex stem-changing verbs. The next group of stem-changing verbs are slightly more complex in that they should be memorized as a group. This is because the stem change does not necessarily apply across the board to all verbs with the same ending. All right, so looking at verbs that end with TER. In the present tense, some verbs ending in TER duplicate the T in all forms except nous and vous. This group should be memorized because it doesn't apply to all verbs ending in TER. So looking at jeter, to throw away. Notice that nous and vous are conjugated like regular ER verbs. The others, however, have an extra T. But remember, the pronunciation is the same for all of these. Je jette, tu jettes, il jette, it's all jette. Other similar verbs include feuilleter, to leaf through, for example, a book or a magazine; octer, hiccup; projeter, to project or to plan; and rejeter, to reject. But not the following verbs: acheter, corseter, éjecter, fileter, and fureter, and haleter, to pant or to gasp. These belong to a different group of stem-changing verbs. All right, so now looking at verbs that end with ler. In the present tense, some verbs ending in ler duplicate the L in all forms except nous and vous. This group should also be memorized because it doesn't apply to all verbs ending in ler. Looking at the verb appeler, to call. Notice that nous and vous are conjugated like regular ER verbs. We drop the ER and add ONS and EZ. However, the other forms duplicate the L. J'appelle, tu appelles, etc. Other similar verbs in this group include étinceler, to sparkle; épeler, to spell; rappeler, to call back; renouveler, to renew. It does not include, however, sceller, ciseler, démanteler, écarteler, geler, harceler, marteler, peler, and modeler. These belong to a different group of stem-changing verbs that we'll get to in a moment. All right, so now looking at verbs that have an E followed by a consonant and then followed by ER. Verbs like lever change the E to E accent grave in all forms except nous and vous in the present tense. So looking at lever on the right, which means to raise or to lift. Again, as usual, notice that nous and vous conjugate just like regular ER verbs. Nous levons, vous levez. However, in the other forms, the E has changed to E accent grave. Je lève, tu lèves, il lève, etc. Some other similar verbs that you might like to learn are achever, amener, élever, emmener, enlever, mener, peser, promener, ramener. Now, and then some other verbs that fall under this category but end with TER, but they don't belong in the jeter category that we looked at earlier, include acheter, corster, fileter, fureter, halter. And then some verbs that end with LER but don't belong in the other group we looked at with appeler. These include sceller, ciseler, démanteler, écarteler, geler, harceler, marteler, peler, and finalement modeler. The next group are verbs that have E accent aigu, followed by a consonant, and then followed by ER. Verbs with E accent aigu in the syllable before the infinitive ending, which is RER, change the E accent aigu to E accent grave in all forms except nous and vous in the present tense. So over on the right, look at the verb préférer, which means to prefer. We have that E accent aigu followed by a consonant, followed by the ending ER. Notice that nous and vous are conjugated just like a regular ER verb. The accents don't change. We just drop the final ER and add our endings, O and S and EZ. But in the other forms, the final E accent aigu changes to E accent grave. Je préfère, tu préfères, il préfère. Some verbs that are very similar to this include céder, to yield, célébrer, considérer, compléter, différer, espérer, gérer, inquiéter, lacérer, modérer, posséder, protéger, refléter, répéter, révéler, suggérer, et zébrer. You never know when you might want to tell something. We should stripe this. Anyway, it's there. Notice that protéger has an asterisk next to it. This verb ends with GER and will therefore take an E in nous protégeons to keep that soft G sound. So that is the end of the first part of this little series. In the second video, I'm going to give you some examples to practice to see what you've learned. So check out the second video, see how you go. Remember, n'oubliez pas, pratique rend parfait. So the practice makes perfect. The more you study and practice, the easier it will get. Je m'appelle Madame Brown, merci beaucoup et au revoir, à la prochaine.